It's no secret that I think James Gunn's DCU is off to an incredible start. Superman was a triumph and optimistic recentering of what the world's most iconic superhero means to the world, while Season 2 of Peacemaker brought us back down to Earth and expanded the world of the DCU in interesting new ways, alluding to where they might take things down the line in a crossover event. The two projects showing us some of the beauty and hope that exists in this universe, but also, the darkness and evil that makes someone like Superman necessary. And I can't say enough good things about either Peacemaker or Superman. And you know what? I'll throw Creature Commandos in there as well. It's pretty good. James Gunn already had my trust because of his excellent work in the MCU, but now we've gotten a chance to see his vision lift off. And you know what? I'm fully on board with the DCU. And now Supergirl is here. Well, I mean, not here. You gotta wait till next year for the movie. But she's definitely announced her arrival. The first trailer for Craig Gillespie's entry into the DCU promises a seismic expansion of Millie Alcock's cameo as Kara Zor-El in Superman. And so far, I'm on board with pretty much everything we're seeing so far. The trailer bringing Supergirl into this world to the tune of Blondes Call Me gave me everything I was hoping to get from a Supergirl film. So let's break down the trailer, unpack every ounce of what's in store for us, as well as the ways in which it looks to be a very faithful, and I mean very faithful, adaptation of Tom King's comic run, Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. And most of all, how it exists in communication with what the DCU has already given us, and how fucking hyped I am for Supergirl, dude. Right off the bat, if you hadn't told me beforehand that the film is directed by Craig Gillespie, I would have thought Gunn helmed this entry too, because it immediately gives Guardians of the Galaxy vibes, from the needle drops to the broken punk attitude to the whole cosmic adventure element of it, even down to some of the space tech and ships. It's got that Gunn cosmic aesthetic going on there. The first moments of Krypto being a shit disturber and using a newspaper of Superman as his pee pad are just completely James Gunn. Even the way the aliens, planets, starships, and overall tech look here is very Guardians-esque. Gillespie comes in and feels incredibly at home in Gunn's universe. Kara is almost like a Peter Quill Rocket type without a team behind her. But when Kara talks about there only being two Kryptonians left, her and her cousin, Kal,
no.
You kind of get the sense that an expanded found family is forming, and that Ruthye, the young girl she's going to go on this adventure with, is a part of it. This could also align with the original comic of both Clark and Kara feeling alone in the universe. Kara is being much more literal about it, and by the end of the story, it helps to give hope that, you're never truly alone. This naturally aligns with Gunn's emphasis on found family and traumatic upbringings. Supergirl is ultimately more in line with the protagonists Gunn tends to explore than someone like Superman is, in that Kara puts on a front of coldness and indifference, has to learn to find strength within her experiences, and accept that she does actually care more than she lets on, versus Clark, who, in Gunn's version, is more unabashedly himself, with the story being more about the need for his environment to change than for him to. But Craig Gillespie's filmography makes him the perfect director to tackle this film. Not only is he incredibly skilled at depicting complex female protagonists, he's really drawn to the messiness and psychology behind female anti-heroes. Not that Supergirl is an anti-hero, but she isn't much of a hero when we first meet her in this trailer. She's sort of just existing and trying to scrape by amidst all the heartbreak surrounding her, like Tonya Harding or Cruella. Those two ultimately become villains by the end of their stories, but they're kind of reaffirming something within themselves that they knew all along. And again, that's obviously not going to be the case for Kara, at least the villain side of it, but seeing the contrast of how Kara lives amongst and then rises above those circumstances, reaffirming the heroism that's existed within her all along, I mean, it makes sense. Like, this is definitely a Craig Gillespie protagonist, and it's going to be really interesting to see him bring all of these complexities out of Supergirl. I think the biggest takeaway from this trailer, though, is that Supergirl isn't just playing fast and loose with Tom King's Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. No, it appears to be a mostly faithful adaptation, which is pretty cool considering Woman of Tomorrow is arguably the greatest Supergirl comic of all time, and also a great launching point for the character and how she contrasts with Superman. Tom King was inspired by true grit when writing Woman of Tomorrow, and while we don't necessarily get much of the Maddie Ross, Rooster Cogburn dynamic in the trailer, given the fact that the point of view we get in the trailer is that of Kara, not Ruthye, this adaptation feels more akin to something like Paper Moon. Kara isn't Clark. She didn't grow up on a nice farm with loving adoptive parents. She grew up on a planet that is now extinct with friends and family who are dead, or I guess there's a chance that they might be missing out there in the cosmos. And the entire reason she didn't die with her family was so that she could protect her cousin, the only remaining survivor or tether to her people, only to arrive on Earth and see that, whoops, he's all grown up with a good head on his shoulders thanks to the Kents, older than her, making her entire mission, her purpose, null and void. She grew up truly alienated from people on Earth, and with the knowledge that, despite having Clark, her family is gone. We don't know yet when Kara came to Earth in the DCU, I'm sure we'll find out in the film, but her alienation is always a big part of her character, even though she, outside of Superman the Animated Series, has her own adoptive parents in Midvale. I don't know if this will be touched on. I don't even know if she's gonna have adoptive parents. Probably not, since she's 23 in this film compared to her turning 21 in the comic, so she's a bit aged up here when she got to Earth as opposed to being a teenager like in most adaptations. Either way, the sorrow and pain of watching everything and everyone she ever loved and cared for crumble before her very eyes is more than Clark ever had to experience. It's different. Kara gets drunk on planets with red suns and doesn't have much to look forward to, is struggling to get on with her life and doesn't really see much of a point. She kind of rolls her eyes at the blue Boy Scout her cousin is and the fact that having hope is unproductive. Kara was failed by hope 3 times. She clung to it, and all it did was bring her more pain as she watched the destruction of her homeworld, Krypton. Krypton was destroyed, and part of the planet, her city, Argo City, was splintered off from the rest of the planet, surviving as almost a lifeboat out in space. She was 14. She watches her planet die, which, is traumatizing enough, and then as her city floats away from her red sun and towards a yellow sun, the kryptonite her city is made of turns to a lethal form of kryptonite, causing the majority of the city's inhabitants to start dying of cancer. Her father, who I guess is another brilliant scientist in the House of El, builds a lead shield under the ground with Kara's help in hopes of saving what remains of the inhabitants of Argo. They then come under fire from an asteroid field, making this the 3rd time she's had to watch her people die. Only then is she sent off in an escape pod in the hopes of joining Kal-El on Earth. Her memories poisoned by trauma, all consuming. We see in the trailer glimpses of the destruction of Krypton and Kara reciting the tragedy to Ruthye. It'll be super, no pun intended, impactful to see the destruction of Krypton from the perspective of someone who actually lived it, as opposed to the traditional depiction of it as we see in most Superman adaptations. Not that we're getting to see from the perspective of people who haven't lived it, but they're Superman's parents. It's almost like legend at this point. It's like watching a historical reenactment versus what I imagine we'll see in the Supergirl film, which is, Kara's memories, her trauma. Because of all she's endured, Kara is world-weary. She swears she's a drunk, all because she's seen a lot of horror and understands the world, the universe, more deeply because of her experiences. That is what ultimately gives her strength. Whether she knows it or not, those experiences are ultimately what give her strength. She's not just this kid discovering the world, she's a kid who was forced to grow up fast, and how that unrelenting shove into maturity shaped her attitude and worldview. She's discovered the world already, and so the material, both King's Run and the film it seems, treats her as such, and as a warrior, because that's who she is. She's a warrior from the House of El, someone resilient and fierce. And this mission that she's on to help Ruthye is going to be her reaffirming the person she used to be. King's talked a lot in the past about how Kara's not just Supergirl, she's Superwoman, and this story is all about her recognizing that, about everyone recognizing that. Woman of Tomorrow, and by extension this movie, explores how she keeps carrying on and how hard it is for her to have experienced all she has. I think the general public perception of Supergirl, especially based on the shows, is that, oh, she's just Lady Superman. Like, why do we even care? This is just whatever. She's as recognizable as Superman, but not quite as iconic. Comics fans knew for years this wasn't true, but throughout the decades, the character had been remixed and interpreted by many writers to a point where it felt like it was Supergirl, but with an asterisk. Whether it was her becoming a Red Lantern or the whole Power Girl thing, it just felt like they knew who the character was, but they kept trying to change her. With Woman of Tomorrow, Tom King wanted to get back to basics, return to the heart and essence of who Kara Zor-El is as a person, distilling her down to her purest form. What would the harrowing experiences linked to her origin really do to someone like Kara? Someone who witnessed the death of her people and planet and who was a teenager when it all happened, as opposed to Kal-El, who was an infant and sent away as a refugee with no memories of home. What kind of residual effects would that trauma have? And how would that affect her as a person throughout her life? Clark only understands the destruction of his home world from a historical standpoint. That doesn't mean there isn't a yearning on his part to connect with his heritage or a melancholy of never knowing Krypton. I mean, we see that very clearly in Gunn's Superman film. It's kind of a key plot point, but it's not the same as actually having lived through it as Kara did. She knew the people who died and the way of life that was lost forever. So instead of trying to change Kara, softening the edges or sharpening them to make Supergirl interesting again, King constructs an honest portrait of who this character is. He allows her to simply be herself, exist, which is why many point to Woman of Tomorrow as the definitive Supergirl story. It's the character in her purest form. This is the exact same thing James Gunn did with Superman. Instead of trying to change Superman the way culture had been trying to for decades, Gunn went back to the heart of what makes the character resonate with people, especially during a time where being kind and compassionate, even for people who don't deserve it, is considered old-fashioned. Telling a story about a character who is kind and virtuous in an era that doesn't see kindness as a virtue, thus making Superman a bit of a rebel, a bit punk rock.
That's being human, and that's my greatest strength.
Gunn took the Tom King approach with Superman, and therefore it's so fitting that the DCU's follow-up to Superman is an adaptation of Tom King's Supergirl. All of this is in line with Gunn's vision of giving us the purest distillation of these iconic characters. It's about introducing you to these characters and getting audiences to like them for who they are, warts and all, which directly ties into the POV through which this story is told. In the comics, Supergirl is being experienced through the lens of Ruthye, a 14-year-old girl who has a lot more in common with Kara than the two initially realize. Kara is trying to protect Ruthye from the darker sides of the world, but that world still reaches them both. As opposed to the end of True Grits, though, the end of Woman of Tomorrow is about how Supergirl inspires hope and can rise above the darkest parts of life. It's a more realistic representation of what the House of El stands for, rather than the unvarnished idealism of Superman. And while Woman of Tomorrow features Kara from the point of view of Ruthye, the trailer is very Kara-focused, a more straightforward approach, which makes a lot of sense. We were introduced to this character at the end of Superman, and so that was our gateway into her story, and we don't really know who this character is, and so it would be weird to tell her story through someone else's lens. We want to experience it with her as the focal point. You get the sense that Ruthye is going to help Kara recognize the potential within herself, the compassion and understanding she has despite the hardened exterior and directionlessness she projects. Kara keeps her existential nihilism at bay by numbing the pain, reciting mantras to herself on her 23rd birthday that
23 will be the best year yet.
Ruthye, on the other hand, is looking for a warrior to guide her on her revenge quest and finds Kara in a state where she doesn't have superpowers, at least I'm assuming due to the Red Sun and that being the state Ruthye finds her in the comics. Kara elects to defend the young girl from some bounty hunters, I don't know, maybe people being sent after her by Krem, the villain of the story, or whoever, competing bounty hunters. I have no idea. Maybe they're just people who pissed her off from something that happened. I don't know. But throughout the trailer, there's also a lot more references to Superman than you might expect. At least what I was expecting, being someone familiar with the original comic. It makes sense given the interconnectivity of the DCU and her appearance at the end of Superman, but it's also clear that the name Superman carries weight throughout the galaxy. I mean, Ruthye knows who Superman is. Kara wears what she knows to be her family crest on her chest, but to the universe, that's Superman's crest. For Kara, it's a reminder of everything she's lost, the baggage she carries with her, the pain she carries with her every day. She constantly lives in Superman's shadow, and I think that has to weigh on her and affect the way she views the world. Maybe she resents the way Superman acts and uses the symbol as a beacon of hope or whatever, because hope did very little to the people on Krypton, and specifically the people that she knew floating out there in her city. Deep down, she knows she can do good and maybe wants to do good, just on her own terms, rather than the way Superman does it. Perhaps she views it as being a bit performative or aggrandizing. It's not, because we've seen Superman's perspective and we know that genuinely this is just the kind of person he is, the good-hearted person raised by the Kents. But Kara, she doesn't believe in people being good-natured for a reason. There has to be some sort of ulterior motive or something. We also see Kara crying over Krypto in the trailer, which alludes to Krypto's near-death experience at the hands of Krem in the comics, and which is almost certainly going to be what guides Kara towards Ruthye in her revenge quest. Kara wants revenge against Krem as much as Ruthye does, and that's why they kind of team up there. Krypto is the one being she has a genuine connection and love for, and he's hurt. She owes it to him to do something about it. The quest in Woman of Tomorrow causes Kara and Ruthye to reflect on their shared feelings about being victims of a harsh, vast, and unforgiving universe. I think Ruthye will help Kara with the destruction of her homeworld and everything she knew and loved, and Ruthye with Krem being the person that killed her dad. Oh, and I guess, Kara also almost losing Krypto, and yeah, man, this girl just does not catch a break. I think ultimately Ruthye will help Kara affirm her purpose as a hero. She seems to be a bit more positive and views Kara and Superman as these beacons of hope, whether or not Kara chooses to believe that she can also be that beacon of hope. Perhaps she could be something more. I mean, towards the end of the trailer, she's acting heroically, but with an understanding of the world around her. She's not just gonna purport that she's a Girl Scouts or whatever, right? Like, she sees the world as it is and maybe has to decide to do some good about it, to make it a little less miserable of a place to live in. Ruthye will help Kara affirm her purpose as a hero, show her that while she maybe can't envision a future and has no sense of her life's purpose, perhaps the way to carry on is through caring and compassion. Perhaps the actions of Kal-El reverberate throughout the DCU and inspire people to act with consideration of others in mind, no matter how reluctant they may be, like Kara. Yes, Kara sees the world for what it is, but that doesn't mean she has to resort to apathy. If she really saw no point in it at all, she'd resort to being like the bounty hunters she hates. That could be where Lobo comes in. I mean, King's original plan for Woman of Tomorrow was to focus the story on Lobo and Kara, with Lobo being the rooster character and Kara Maddie, if we stick to the True Grit comparison. In the film, obviously we'll have Kara and Ruthye as Rooster and Maddie, but it feels like the most fitting role for Lobo would be that of LaBeouf, a rival bounty hunter after the same target, that target being Krem, aka Tom Chaney, aka Josh Brolin's character in True Grit. Just stick with me here. This story really is just True Grit in space, like many others before me have said. While Lobo isn't featured in much of the trailer, we do get a brief shot of him walking towards the camera, mostly in silhouettes. We can make out Momoa's figure and the iconic lit cigar moving throughout some sort of wreckage or whatever. I wish we got a better look at him, but I get why they're holding back. They just kind of want to tease it, and it's fine. I get it. This is only the first trailer, but fuck, I want to see Momoa as Lobo, damn it! While he's apparently going to have a small role in the film, he might nonetheless reflect the path Kara is on. Someone willing to burn it all down because of a personal wrongdoing, who's lost his compassion and become fully enveloped by nihilism. Lobo solely works for profit. He represents the inevitability of bad things happening, and for Kara, someone, who's experienced the death of her people and planet, a reminder of her hopelessness in the vastness of the universe. He's useful from a story and character perspective in contrasting Superman, a hero who sees the good in everyone, with Kara, who sees the truth, a pragmatist who doesn't see the point in anything existing in everything she's lost without seeing a future, without seeing tomorrow. Lobo is a character who could amplify those feelings within Kara and sharpen her edge even more, especially given the fact that she almost lost her best friend, that damn dog. But most likely, Lobo is going to give Kara, for lack of a better phrase, someone to punch in the story. Krem is just a scrawny dude, not much of a physical threat, and if you're familiar with the story, the climax of this whole thing, the resolution of the whole thing, it's not a big fight. So Lobo, I bet, is on Krem's trail because his acts of evil don't just start with Kara and Ruthye. He was probably hired by someone else and is on the trail at the same time as Kara and Ruthye, and they keep running into each other along the way, with the ending being Supergirl taking in Krem for actual justice, or just kind of letting him off the hook and giving him a stern talking to, a Superman kind of talk. There would probably be a first meeting where they don't fight and Lobo is like, stay out of my way, this is a job for the main man. Then the second time he'd learn Supergirl can really throw a punch, or maybe this is even in the first interaction, I have no idea. As easy as it would be to write Supergirl as this simmering, angry person, and someone who indulges in violence and rage, that feels like it's better suited in something like the DCEU, the Snyderverse, a universe that undeniably sought to deconstruct these heroes, while the DCU's approach to the superfamily is Reconstruction, and Supergirl is determinedly headed down that track, perhaps even more so than Superman was. Superman is who we aspire to be, but Supergirl, in a lot of ways, is who we are.
He sees the good in everyone, and I see the truth.
Throughout the journey to help Ruthye on her revenge quest, which is, also Kara's revenge quest as well, she can help Ruthye understand that maybe revenge isn't the answer, that killing the person who hurts you won't actually solve anything. You don't have to remain a slave to your trauma, and in fact, the way forward is to make a change, to acknowledge it, to address it, to do something in fixing it, breaking the cycle. Ruthye serves as a mirror to Kara, that while she may be broken, that doesn't mean she's lost. There's a real struggle with the rage Kara feels towards Krem throughout the entire comic, but she can't allow herself to indulge in it. She wants to kill Krem, but she simply can't. Same for Ruthye. I'm sure that will be a big part of the film. Kara's proven she's willing to care for and help others, and perhaps by helping Ruthye look beyond her pain and see a future on the other side, she'll believe it herself. Ruthye is there to help Kara see a future as much as Kara is there to help Ruthye find one. While their tragedies and subsequent trauma may lead them to believe that there's not much good in this world, akin to how Kara believes Clark's a fool with a dream, the bond they share and the consideration they have for each other's well-being should prove that the opposite is true. And while Krem isn't in the trailer, at least I don't think he is, though I'm stoked to see Matthias Schoenaert in the role, I think the idea of both Kara and Ruthye doing what they do in the climax of Woman of Tomorrow in regards to him and everything, I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't read that comic, because you should probably go read it or just watch the film. It might be healthy in allowing them to move past the pain, the nihilism, and the trauma and see tomorrow. Maybe it could help them forge a connection with Lobo as well. They could be contemplating the idea of killing Krem and whether or not that really makes them no better than him or Lobo. And so instead of letting their trauma control their lives, specifically with Kara, she'll likely have to learn to let her past shape her into a more empathetic person and do what she can to ensure that there is a tomorrow, not only for her, but for others like Ruthye. And man, if that doesn't sound like a beautiful companion piece to Superman, I don't know what does. Instead of reliving the same pain every day, Kara could allow the hope and possibility for a new day to rise with the sun. Kara will learn that while bad things will happen, she can still do something to help people, that it is worth giving a damn, and that while perhaps existence is cruel and unforgiving, we can make it better with each other. We can be in charge of our future instead of our experiences dictating it for us. But beyond anything about its message, what's most exciting about Supergirl is the promise of it functioning as a base for the character, as opposed to a story with her being very established. It was fine to do that with Superman because, well, I mean, look how many times we've seen that story, and it's Superman, for God's sakes. Everyone knows who Superman is. Whereas here, sure, there have been other Supergirl films and TV shows before, but there's never been anything like this, and as we've discussed earlier, within the DCU, it's important to depict these characters in their purest form, and then in subsequent films or appearances or whatever, build them out along with the universe. Oh, and the action and spectacle and visuals all look magnificent, just to be on the safe side. Like, not taking away how incredible and dynamic and cool this film looks. Like, it looks like it's gonna be a hell of a cosmic road trip kind of film. Plain and simple, Supergirl looks like it's just going to absolutely fucking rip. And Millie Alcock is already the best Supergirl. I'm sorry, she's already giving me everything I want from this character, and that's just from a tiny cameo and a teaser trailer to go off of. I see what James Gunn saw in her, and I mean, James Gunn hasn't been wrong in casting before, and this just continues the trend. Man, this is great. This trailer is awesome. Can't wait to look out to the expansive future Supergirl is building with the DCU.